to as many questions as we can, so please do not interrupt the presentation portion. That's simply going to cut into your time for questions. So if we can just remain respectful and quiet during the presentation, we will then get to questions and answers, and I promise we'll get to as many of you as we possibly can. With that being said, I'd like to introduce our congressman, the speaker for the evening. Congressman Dold was elected this past November. He's represented the people in the 10th District since then. He's a third-generation resident of the 10th District. Prior to being elected, he was a small business owner headquartered in Northfield, Illinois. As a small business owner and operator, he understands the issues facing us as a nation right now. He's had to fight to make a payroll. He's had to fight to keep his business going during tough times. He understands what we're facing, and that's why, as Americans for Prosperity, we're proud to host him at this town hall. Americans for Prosperity is a fiscally conservative organization, and we host town halls across the country for congressmen and senators and elected officials who espouse those fiscally conservative principles. With that, I'd like to say we're proud to have Congressman Dold.
Slideshow in a second. But I want to thank you all for coming. And I know we've got folks here from a multitude of different ideas and different perspectives. One of the things that I'd like to do, if I can, is talk about how we in the 10th District can respect one another. We can have different views, but I think here, well, at least my ground rules is let's have some respect for opposing views. Let's hear out the questions, and then we'll have go out and have questions. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure, because frankly, we've seen town halls go across the country, how they get out of control. That's frankly not how we do things in the 10th District. So I want to make sure that we're respectful of all different views, beliefs, and ideas. All right, so what I would like to do, if we've got this up, is go through a quick little slideshow about what's been going on in Washington, run through some stuff for you, and then we'll open it up to questions. And so what we want to do is let's just jump right in. There's no question in Washington over the last 5 months since we've been there, we've all heard about jobs. Number one issue we face in our nation today, I think, is jobs in the economy. How do we jumpstart the economy, get more people back to work? Unemployment's at 9.1%. That is the percentage that's done nationally. It's actually much higher than that in areas of the 10th District. Go to areas of North Chicago and Waukegan, it's as high as 22%. We have certain segments there that's even higher than that. So we want to make sure that we are, again, dealing with the jobs deficit. We've got a fiscal deficit. There's no question about that. The fiscal deficit that we have, we are spending literally billions, actually trillions of dollars that we don't currently have. This has been going on both sides of the aisle for a long time. Okay, Washington has a spending problem. There's no question about that. The time now is for us to solve that problem, come together and solve the fiscal problems that we have. I would also argue that there's an energy deficit and also a leadership deficit in Washington, D.C. Now more than ever before, we need leadership in Washington, D.C. to come together to solve the problems that we face. Let's jump on to the next one. Spending. We've all talked and heard about the spending that's going on. Washington knows how to spend money very, very well. We've seen a spike since 2007 in terms of the government spending that goes basically up through the roof. Personal spending, which is the blue line, you all know. You don't need a chart to tell you what's going on with the personal spending. The American public, American families, businesses, and the like can tighten their belt, and things are going down in terms of the personal spending. The federal government employment. If you see here on this chart, and just as if I can, the charts that we're putting up, the figures are coming from the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, the Office of Management and Budget, and so these are things that are going to be verified through those sources as opposed to something that we've put together in our office. We see that from 1993, this is a ramp that goes down in terms of federal government employment, excluding the post office. Much of that ramp down is coming from the military, and the military that is in essence leaving that workforce and jumping into the private sector. And we've seen it level off, and then it's starting to rise pretty precipitously over the last several years. This is the slide that I think was one of the more compelling ones that got my attention. If we look historically at what's going on here with these slides, back during World War II, as a percentage of GDP, it rose over 100% right around that time after World War II. The reason why we're able to still get credit during that time is World War II was a single event. It wasn't going to go on for an extended period of time, and we were still able to get credit. We see what happened, and we were able to pay that down. We see it rise a little bit, and now we see it's on its way up again. And it's on its way on a trajectory that is truly unsustainable. At 90% of debt to GDP, what happens is the economy starts to stall. We can't continue down this path. Okay, there's just no doubt about it. And if we take this and we continue this on even a few decades even further, it continues on that path. This is the problem. Okay, this is not a Democrat problem, a Republican problem. This is our country's problem. Right now we're spending 42 cents of every single dollar is borrowed. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. When we talk about the pot of money that we're spending, $1.5 trillion is our deficit. It's been that way for a period of time. And what I can tell you is that $1.5 trillion, does anybody really know what $1.5 trillion is?
A lot of money.
A lot of money. It is a lot of money. Can you quantify it? Can you quantify what $1.5 trillion is? I like to tell people about my 9-year-old, she's like 1.5. It's a little bit more than 1 and not quite 2. You're absolutely right. $1.5 trillion works out to be about $3.4 million a minute in deficit spending. $58,000 a second. I can't say it fast enough when we've already spent it. Okay, that's a significant amount of spending. And if we look at it, we cannot continue down this path. If I ran my business the way the federal government is being run right now, I'd be out of business inside of a month. Let's go to the next. We all know about July 4th. That's a date we all hold dear. That's the one we all remember. July 27th is another date that you should remember, because that is our debt date. Every date after that the federal government turns on a light switch, it's done with debt. Okay, that's just unsustainable. I thought this was a particularly interesting slide. If we take a historical view and we take a look back, in 1970, what was our debt and how much was held by foreign entities? Our debt back in 1970, about $283 billion. About 5% of that was held by foreign entities. We fast forward to 1990, that jumps to 19%. In 2010, we're at 47%, and it's a little bit more than that right now. So the question then becomes, who owns that debt? Well, I think you all know who owns that debt. If I were to ask just a show of hands, who thinks that it's China? China is the vast majority, owns the vast majority in terms of other nations. They own about 29.2%. Japan, I guess not too far behind at about 20% of that debt. Let's go, you'll be able to see it, I think, there. 29.2% for China, just under 20% for Japan. That's who owns our debt right now. I had the opportunity to go over to a debt auction in Washington, D.C. to see the country actually auction off our T-bills. It used to be that there was about 47 entities that were in the room that were purchasing that debt. It's down to about 17 right now. They sold about $50 billion worth of T-bills. The vast majority of them were within the last 30 seconds of that auction. The biggest threat to our own national security is our debt. This is according to Mike Mullen, who is obviously the chairman of the Joint Chiefs under President Obama. The spending and the revenue coming in. The red is obviously the spending that's happened over the past. It's also what we traditionally think in terms of tax revenues, where it's going to be. We can see that gap growing year after year. When people ask, hey, how are we spending our money? Because that's a legitimate question. Where does it go? And certainly we've got a number of different pieces in the pie. During the continuing resolution, that was when we first got into Washington, the continuing resolution, are we going to keep the government open? Are we not going to keep the government open? The continuing resolution was all about the non-defense discretionary spending. That's the only thing that we were able to even talk about during that period of time. Are we going to keep the government open? And what I'll tell you is that we have to have a budget. We didn't have a budget, which is one of the reasons why we needed to have that continuing resolution, how we're going to fund things. I've said before, and I'll say it again, that as the Republicans, I think that we need to talk about things that are near and dear to